Hi, everybody. How are you? It's Paula Connor here with Elevate Me Hub, and it is Friday, the 15th of September. Can't even believe where we're at in this year. This year has gone by so fast. Haven't done a video in a little while. The last one I did was, well, there were two. There was a teaching on telling lies, and then there was a really, really good yoga class that was all about the throat chakra and also had a lot to do with the lymphatic system as well. So today I wanted to come on because actually, it was in the middle of the whole couple of years ago, I'll say 2 years ago, in the middle of this whole situation that's been happening on the planet. I did get to meet this nurse, a wonderful nurse who was you know, and she actually introduced me to this fellow called Neville Goddard. Neville Goddard. And it was through what she had shared with me and a little bit of research I did into Neville Goddard and a little bit of readings into some of his teachings that I became aware about how the imagination is the Christ. The imagination actually is the Christ consciousness operating within your being. And it's really interesting that the imagination is not taught in school, even from the little ones, kindergarten. It's not taught at all, and in fact it's kind of shunned upon. No daydreaming, none of that stuff. But we have to imagine something in order to create it. And if you need a little bit of context on what I'm going to talk about here, then you might want to revisit a video I did on Samson and Delilah. Samson and Delilah was a teaching inspired by the One, channeled through Sophia, that talks about how we can transcend or move beyond the idea of all of this negative influence, this heavy influence. So I did a video on that. And there's also a video on Sophia Love's channel. And that will connect all the dots for you, because I got an opportunity to ask a question. And then that was the answering about Samson and Delilah. That was a guidance from One on how you can start practical steps towards abundant living. Because if we look at our external world right now, we have plenty of evidence that everything is crumbling. It's being destroyed, everything, which we know is happening. There are two timelines on the planet right now, those that want to continue with the idea, exploring the idea of fear and the ego, and the other timeline is all about multidimensional thinking, multidimensional being, opening up our hearts, living in joy, creating for your benefit, not for my benefit. So what I want to create, if I'm creating in a way that uplifts you, that's actually the original idea of us being here. Not to come here, create stuff and hoard our wealth and me. It's not supposed to be about that. And that's where I believe we were tricked. Or perhaps we were misled because we were told that you have to see it to believe it. That's actually inaccurate. You must see it, create it in your mind first, believe it, and then it will manifest. So why that intro that I just gave you? Well, a girlfriend of mine in the States who I met through psychic development training course with Lisa Gaulis, God bless her soul. She's no longer with us, but she was an incredible seer. And I met her, and she sent me a video last week on a teaching from The Seven Eyes of God by Neville Goddard. And I liked it so much. I found it so powerful with respect to how we create and the power of the imagination that I typed out all 8 pages. And I want to share it with you today. So this is for the way showers, the star seeds, the light workers, the truth seekers. This is how we are going to create our new earth and do it very quickly. Because yes, as Amanda Lawrence shared, we can look, but don't stare at the destruction of our reality. You can look, oh, wow, that's really interesting. Look at the shenanigans they're doing now, focusing on what we want to create, the reality that we want as divine co-creators with Source. So The Seven Eyes of God is a teaching. This is from 1959. Before I even showed up on the planet. And I have written a course called mindyourmindseries.com, mindyourmindseries.com, that you can use as a tool to get you out of your head and into your heart. It's the whole purpose of the course that I created. It's how to mind your mind, mind those thoughts, not police the thoughts, but basically manage your thoughts, because you're very cautious about who you let into your house, right? You don't just let anybody into your home. And we should be cautious of what we put into our body from a nutrition perspective. But are we cautious about what we put into our mind, what we allow ourselves to see and to hear? So I want to talk to you about this teaching from Neville Goddard. Okay. So it concerns, so what he says is, he starts with, I'd like to look tonight into what is on my mind. What he says is the greatest book of all time, and that's the Bible. And I have not read the Bible. I know a couple of quotes: "Forgive them, Lord, they know not what they do." There's one I can remember right now. So anyway, he goes on to say that he wants to share a teaching from the Bible, a section that perhaps we're not familiar with. And it concerns the 7 eyes of God from the vision of Zechariah. And the vision goes on as follows. He saw a stone of 7 facets, and the voice said, "This actually is the 7 eyes of God. So forget this little planet and know that man is the true earth in which God is planted." These are the 7 visions of God, 7 increasingly clarifying visions of the Creator. Bible names them, but you must look for them. The first eye appears only once in the Bible, in Isaiah 14. And it says, Lucifer, the morning star, and it tells how he is fallen and cut down to the ground. This shining being. All races have taught that man has fallen. It is not something that belongs to the Christian or Jewish faiths, but all races have held this concept. So the first eye of God is Lucifer, cut down to the ground. The second eye is Moloch, this strange god that demands sacrifices. And this is in Jeremiah 32. Man offers up his sons and daughters to appease this being he conceives to be God. But the voice said, "I command them not. Neither came unto my mind that they should do this abomination to cause Judah to sin." He goes on to say, this eye is in every man who thinks he has angered God and must make sacrifices to appease him. All the wars of the world are an appeasement. The Inquisition, with its tortures, was an appeasement. The wicker baskets in which men were burned alive were an appeasement. They did it all to appease God, that he might not be angry. The third eye of God is Elohim, or gods above and outside of man. The elements he worshipped, the stars and planets he thinks can regulate his life and influence his behavior. He turns to something outside of himself, and it fails him, and he cries that he is forsaken. The fourth eye is Shaddai, Almighty. In this eye, man seeks security and comfort. These are the governments, the mighty politicians, the political machines, the rulers, the man trusts, and all this fails him too. And then he turns to the fifth eye, which is Pahhath. I don't know how to pronounce it, but I think it's Pahhath, which means to dig a ditch or to snare animals or dig pit. But it does not mean to snare the animals of the forest. No. It is man I bring into this my little trap. Much of the world functions like that today, everywhere in every business, especially the great advertising campaigns. These people rule like tyrants over us. Every paper, every magazine, every TV commercial has another method of trapping us into buying all these things. So many things that we never get them paid for before we have still others. And then the sixth eye is Jehovah, Yod He Vod He, or I am. Man finally grows out of the snaring process. He does not now have to trap anyone in the world, but only bodily assert himself. Bold inner persuasion will create the condition that I am persuaded of. That is Jehovah, the sixth eye. Seventh eye is Jesus, or Jehovah saves, or rescue, where man boldly asserts himself, but his heart is torn for all those still asleep. And he sacrifices for the others and gives himself for the world, the whole vast world, not as the churches teach it, but as the mystic will tell you. You will take anyone, no matter who he is or what he has done, for he is only in a state, not as the churches teach it, a state. He is in a state, which is what I call lost in the darkness. And this is from the teachings of Paul Selig, or rather the guides through Paul Selig. He's got a ton of books. The first one is called I Am the Word, but they teach that when another is choosing what the ego mind would judge as completely wrong, they're lost in the darkness. They're lost. They've been seduced. So he goes on to say, you do not condemn anyone, but you lift him out of this state. And you do it by identifying the one you would save with the idea he wants to embody, and to the degree that you are faithful to your vision of that person. So basically what it means is you see them in their absolute highest and best potential. You don't see them as a poor, unhealthy, homeless person, as an example. You see them as a divine being in their perfect state. So that person, he will embody his ideal and become it. You see him in his highest potential, divine perfection, to the eyes of the Christ, to the eyes of love. Those are the teachings that came through Melchizedek, which is the guides that Paul Selig channels or shares with. That is the eye called Jesus, or the seventh eye. And then he goes on to say that there was an eighth eye only implied in the Bible, and it is veiled. And this is where it gets really, really interesting. On the eighth day, they circumcise the child and unveil the organ of creation. There is an eye in man, and Blake names it. He says he did not come. He hid in Albion's forest. Albion is Blake's name for universal man or universal woman, male or female. This eye is hidden in Albion's forest in the dark convolutions of the brain. There, this eye is hiding. When you finally begin to exercise your imagination for another and actually revel in the joy of others as they become the embodiment of what they desire, and you revel in that far beyond what you would for yourself, that is the eye of Jesus. What begins to be the perfect seeing of the seventh eye of God, then something stirs. And it stirs exactly like something trying to get out of an egg. It's something trying to break through Golgotha. And Golgotha is the skull. That's the meaning of the word. But it is held by 5 nails, the 5 senses. The 5 senses confine man to his world, and then he breaks loose from the skull as the 7th eye is clarified. And the 8th eye sees concrete reality for the first time in its life. And the once seeing clearly, once seeing clearly, he never blames anyone. So that's where the whole teaching of God only sees God comes from, and the whole ideology of the only way to get to the Creator, to get to God, is through the Christ. That's through witnessing everybody as divine beings. They're just in their process or their state or their ego challenge or their life path, and the ego is busy judging them. That's why I love the saying, eyes on your own paper. Pay attention to your own journey, because everybody else's journey is nanya business. Okay, so the 5 senses confine man to this world, and the 8th eye sees concrete reality for the first time in this life, and the once seeing clarity, he never blames anyone. For with this 8th eye, he sees the perfect world. This is called circumcision, or the unveiling of the perfect organ, which is man's imagination. On the 8th day, he is circumcised. That means the 8th eye is open. It does not open by the process of time, but only after the clarifying of the seventh eye of Jesus. Once you begin to witness everyone through the eyes of the Christ, the eyes of love, the eighth eye can be unveiled. Then you see God became man, awakening, become God. So I'm going to say that again. Then you see that God became man, awakening, may become God. I'm not saying man is definitely going to become God. We are aspects of the divine. God contracts himself to this very limit of opacity, so that living in this state may be called the very grave of man. And God enters death's door with them that enter, and lies down in the grave with them in visions of eternity until they awake. And then there are these 7 visions. First, Lucifer is the fallen one. Second, Moloch, the being that demands sacrifice. They are doing that right now, he goes on to say. And remember, this was written in 1959. They are doing that right now, only they call it nationalism, and they offer up their sons and daughters to Molech. Though the voice said, I do not command them to do this and cause Judah to fall into sin. Man sickens of it and turns to the third eye or Elohim, but the stars, the planets, do not respond. Then he turns to the fourth eye of Shaddai, almighty to the financial and the political gods, and then he separates from that and digs his little pit. Path, P-A-H-A-T-H, and snares all the people of the world because he can outsmart them. And because of his smartness, he lives very well during this little span of time from the cradle to the grave. And that is the fifth eye through which much of the world is seeing today. He sickens of it, and then he finds that I am, or that Jehovah is the only reality, or the sixth eye of God. And I build my world as I want it. And when I sicken of it, offer myself as a sacrifice for others, not as in the life sacrifice, but of the deeds, And my good fortune, then comes the joy of hearing their good fortune. So once you become sickened by the snaring and overtaking of others and the absorption instead of the giving, that's when the I am is recognized in the individual, and they want now to create for your benefit, for the benefit of others. As it says in Job 42:5, I heard by the hearing of my ear, but now my eye seeth thee. Suddenly something happened within me. This is now Neville talking about it. Suddenly something happened within me, and the eighth eye opens, and I am circumcised in mind, not in the flesh. And as that something opens within you, you see the reason for it. And you see that eternity is, and you can take anyone that's world and pull them out of their state, the darkness that they are lost in. That's the eighth eye of God. So Neville goes on to share a little bit of a story, because he wants to talk about an experience he had. So he wants to share this experience. The true method of knowledge is through experience or experiment. So he wants to invite you to have an experiment. The true faculty of knowing is experiencing. For when you have had the experience, you no longer care whether anyone knows it, because you know it happens. You know it, and you know that you know it. So I'd like to share this with you, this experience. For when you begin to awaken, then you begin to remember. And this is where we're all at right now, way shores, star seeds, light workers. We're at this remembering stage now. Just a quick brief. Back in April, I had a vision. Well, the first thing happened was I had all these, with my eyes closed in my waking state, I had all these lights come on in my mind's eye, in my third eye, like you're turning on fluorescent lights in a garage. It was like boom, 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 and then they all came on. The next day, I had red roses. I was shown that in my spine, I had red roses blooming in every single vertebrae of my spine. And then the next thing that happened, this is all around the March equinox. Again, during my waking state, I got up to go to the washroom. It was around 4 o'clock, 4:30, 4:20 in the morning. And just as I go back to sleep, I'm still awake. but I can see in my bloodstream all this light language going through. Like I could see like all this light language going through my bloodstream. So that's really really, really trippy. So we're remembering this. And just the other night, I had a memory about mastery, not taking a course on something, but being an absolute expert on it. So I'll continue. So he goes on to say that he wants to share this, that when you begin to awaken, then you will begin to remember. For if Christ is the center, then I can say, return to me the glory that was mine before the world was. That was mine before the world was. I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. If the center of man is Christ, and he was before the world was, then when I begin to awaken, I only begin to remember. And when that happens, then the world cannot any longer teach you anything. Because once you can fully remember the world, this 3D world can't teach you anything. So when man begins to awaken, he does not question the things of the world. He knows that they are not true. This is all an illusion. We are using basically most of our brain to give us the illusion of this experience, thinking that we're not knowing what we're doing. We don't know what we're doing, but we absolutely know everything that we're doing. So when man begins to awaken, he does not question the things of this world. He knows that they are not true. Psychologists tell us a complete understanding of dream depends on the knowledge that you are dreaming. And then that wakes you up for this is the only world they know, right? So they're basically saying that, they speak of a dream state as the unconscious and doubt the worth of it all. That's a psychologist. And again, this was written in 1959. But when you open the eighth eye, you will know there are worlds within worlds, and you are heirs to all of them. You've probably heard the statement, in my Father's house, or my Father's house has many mansions. So Father being the creator of all, and the many mansions being all the dimensional realities. Now, I took ayahuasca. I did 10 sacred ceremonies, and I witnessed many, many, many worlds that are not of this one. Psilocybin also does that. The late Terence McKenna had lots of conversations with the mushrooms, which is really, really interesting. So they speak of dream time, right? So you can test your experience and bring anything into the world to prove it. And this is what he's sharing. He shared that he had a dream a long time ago where he was swimming. He knew he was in a dream swimming. He looked up and saw the shore of a primitive island, not the little island where he was born. For that is well cultivated and in no way primitive, but this was primitive. I saw it was an island and I knew I was dreaming, and I saw these strange things like cement posts driven down through the water, but they were in a state of decay. They could have been at one time part of a jetty. I could see this particular primitive beach, and I prolonged the dream, for if you know you are dreaming, you need not awake. So he's just sharing his dream. Something in him began to tell him, as memory would return, that if he took hold of one of those posts, those pilings, and did not let go and awaken, he would awaken there in that dream. So he felt it. It was solidly real, just as it would feel here. And his hand did not go through it and held on to it and made himself away and awake in that water on that beach. And then he waded ashore. So he woke up in the dream on the shore. He was no more asleep in that sphere than he is here in this one. It taught him a lesson that if I could touch anything in another world and compel myself to awaken while holding it, I would find it real. So you do it for your world. This is the use of the imagination. You do this for the world. So this is how we do it, Wayshowers. Don't look and stare at the crumbling. Focus only on what we want to create. So he says, you do it for the world. This is the use of the imagination. The job you want, the home you would occupy, the marriage you want. Sit at the desk at which you want to sit. Live in the house you want to live in. Be married to the sort of person that you want to be married to. And if you hold it in your imagination, then you will make it real in your outer world. The outer world reflects the inner. So more and more and more of us become connected to our monad, our divine self, the true self that we are, have peace and beauty in the internal world. Remember, the kingdom of heaven is within, and the keys to the kingdom are your agreement to it. It's that you are worthy, that you deserve it, that you are worthy, because we've been told over and over again that we're not. This goes back to the Samson and Delilah video that I shared on what you create, how I create my space to hang out with the energy of Samson. Samson basically is the creator energy. That's how I defined it. So he talks about how you make it real in the outer world, to the imagination. The ancient called this capacity the Western Gate and tied it with the sense of touch. If you can hang on to that thing you touch and then awaken, you will find that the thing has come real. We have it in Genesis in the story of Jacob and Esau. Again, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. Isaac, the father who was blind, said, "Come close that I may touch you. Come closer." And the state symbolized by Jacob, the supplanter, was made real in place of the state that had seemed so real before, symbolized by Esau, Esau. Again, forgive me if I'm not pronouncing these words correctly. We were told again in Judges 19, verse 19, how the 7 locks were shaved from the head of Samson, and then the Philistines came and gouged out his eyes, and he was eyeless in Gaza. And they made him dance before the crowd. He asked to be taken to the temple and place where he might touch the 2 middle pillars. And then he pressed and pushed and pulled down the whole things and slew more Philistines than he had ever slain before in his life. All this is symbolical of the capacity to touch. I know, for I have done it many a time, finding myself dreaming. I have held on to an object to the dream and found myself awakening in another world. I've also found myself in other aspects of this world. He did it in Barbados when he wanted to be seen by his sister, who was 2,000 miles away. But whether it be in this little aspect or another world, it doesn't matter, for there are infinite worlds, and we are the heir to all of them. You can get all you want in this world. You can use the 5th eye or the 4th eye. All those who lead us into battle are using the 2nd and 3rd. Few are using the 6th, and only a teeny tiny inch part of the 7th eye or the eye of Jesus. And not until it is used, and you would rather have the good of another than your own good, and rejoice more from another than for yourself, have you really opened the 7th eye. And then you are ready for the opening of the 8th. And that's because our egos are so busy judging all the wrong things that everybody else is doing, instead of choosing to say whether you'd like it or not, because they have the right to be just as they are. Every single person has the right to be just as they are, irrespective of how we would judge them from an ego perspective. They're a divine being having an experience guided by their own soul. Everything else it's none of our business. That's where, when you witness someone and you do not like what they're doing, I see the one before me through the eyes of the Christ. This is viewing through the 7th eye. So the 7th eye of the eye of Jesus has nothing to do with man being born 2,000 years ago. It has everything to do with the expanding of the mind of man, the expansion of our consciousness. When you exercise the 7th, then something opens. It's the 8th. It is the 8th. But only the 7th. But until the 7th is fully open, then he hides in the forest of Albion. He hides in the dark convolutions of the brain. Mind your mind. It may scare you a little at first, the feeling of an electric battery moving in your head. You feel memory coming back, and you'll feel it on the side of, and then you center it, and then you'll see. That's basically how he's explaining how he felt this eye, the 8th eye, open. Something opens, and you actually see a world no one else can. The 7th eye is based purely on faith. Man does not know God will actually redeem him, and he cries, "Why hast thou forsaken me?" And then the world will be seen. Man seeks security and comfort through the 4th eye. These are the dictators, political machines. They are always going to the country, save the world, and then when they are driven out, they take $500 million with them. We've seen it in this hemisphere, the very ones impoverishing the treasury that men had just called the saviors of their country. They have not reached the 6th eye, or I am. He who has reached that turns to no one. So once you know who you are, you then know who everyone else is. They've not reached the 6th eye, or I am. He who has reached that turns to no one. He knows I am that will be. I am what I am. You can be that or anything you want. Then you go beyond it and you want nothing for yourself and you only want for others. And then he starts giving himself for man. And then when this is completely clarified, the eighth eye opens. You look in the Bible and read the story of the unveiling of the mind of man, but it comes only after the seventh eye is exercised. So I must learn to experience feeling and touching. That is called the Western Gate, and it's closed in man, but he must learn about it. And before I close this eye, he must learn much about the Western Gate. For I was told not to hold back one secret, and having had the experience of holding onto an object, an awakening, not on my bed at all, he's being instructed that he must share it with us. He goes on to say, I awake in the world where I am holding the object. I've been shut out many times from this world by holding on to an object in that world and awakening in it. And it was just as real as this, but I came back to this. I had a body here and one there. When I returned here, where was that other body? He's asking. Have I not many bodies? For I am scattered all over the world. And man, as he begins to awake, collects the scattered portions of himself, and then he finally finds that being that is God. These scattered portions of ourself are all of our parallel experience, parallel realities, or fractions, fractals, fractions of our own soul monadic being. You can love everyone in the world, and you will find joy beyond your wildest dreams in doing good for another when he asks of you. And you, in your imagination, create, and then you have confirmation of it, and then you rejoice as God rejoices. These things that I have spoken, that my joy may remain in you, for whenever anyone awakes, that is the eye of God. Because this whole idea of awakening is waking up and remembering your I am presence and knowing that you're not separate. That's the whole idea of awakening. And this whole expansion of consciousness is really just an expansion in how we perceive things, perception, judgments, all of that is getting a complete upgrade, which is so exciting. For God became man, that man may become God. So this wonderful poem that existed only for God is beginning to exist for itself. Sentience begin to appear in the poem, lifting it to higher states, and we become at last creators, one of an infinite society of gods. The eighth eye is misunderstood by the priesthoods of the world, and they circumcise the child. It is the imagination that must be unveiled, not the physical organ. And it comes only after the perfect clarity of vision through the eye of Jesus. Jesus means Jehovah saves. No one is lost. He has fallen into a state, but you, with the eyes of Jesus, can save him. I see all before me through the eyes of the Christ, through the eyes of love. Again, that is a teaching through Paul Selig and the guides. You ask him, what does he want? And you see him in his perfection, and then seeing it embody itself and rejoice that that person has been lifted out of that mire. You do it over and over again, and then your head becomes alive and you feel electric currents running through it. And yet you will know what you should do, just as a chick knows what it must do to peck its way out of the egg. And then the place where the skull grew together after birth becomes awake again, and you see another world. And you see the world was perfectly made, and every state is perfect. And then you will know that you are awake to play beautifully on this eternal world, to bring out these beautiful combinations made by the Father, by our Father, Mother, Father, God. If tonight talk seems different from what you'd expected, then nothing is more practical than the sixth eye. You can make your world what you want it to be by the sixth eye. In fact, the fifth has done it. You can snare all kinds of people in your little traps. Read the morning papers. Every ad is to snare us into emptying our pockets. And then they will be thrilled if they can do it. Every year we find new traps to get what we have. We have new forms of credit. No one dies leaving anything behind anymore. The whole vast thing is a trap, and it has become the way of life, the fifth eye. But then comes the 6th, 7th, and the 8th. And when the 8th opens, you forgive everyone for everything, no matter what they have done. You as man have gone through every eye. You have worshipped Elohim and sacrificed to Moloch. But when the 8th opens, you will know that nothing displeases the Father but disbelief or unbelief. Sin does not displease him. Priesthoods of the world tell you sin displeases him, but only disbelief. For they that come to him must believe in him. Remember, he said earlier that the 7th eye, the 6th eye of Jesus is pure faith. Pure faith. You've got no evidence, perhaps. And that's where I can't tell you. I can't explain to you an experience of God. I can only explain to you the experience of God that I've had directly. It's experiential, and it does move beyond conjecture when your faith is unshakable. And that's what we are being asked now, is unshakable faith. So the priesthoods of the world, the priesthoods of the world tell you sin displeases him, but only disbelief for that come to him must believe in him. Anything you can believe is an image of truth. You can believe that someone in dire need is now well taken out. Then he can become as you see him. But sin does not displease the Father. It means to miss the mark, to miss the point. And he comes to the world to show everyone how not to miss the mark. If I do miss the mark, he makes a greater effort to show me how not to miss. In Hebrews 11, those who come to him must believe that he is, and that he is the rewarder of them that see. So see him first, and then all these things will be added. So these are the 8 eyes in man. The 8th hides in the forest of Albion, dark convolutions of the mind. What hides in the Albion forest is the convolutions of the brain. Breathing won't bring it out, or diets or yoga exercises will not do it. He will only come out when, as you look through the 7th eye, which is the vision of Jesus, you see only the good of another and glory in that beyond what is only for yourself. Then you will begin to see through the 8th eye of God. Use the 7th consciously and take every person, regardless of color, race, creed, and ask him only, what do you want? For in him there is neither Greek nor Jew nor bond for free. So you take everyone, for he has only fallen into a state, and you single out that individual and you see them in their perfection. The opening of the 8th eye is actually the second coming of Jesus. It's within me and you and all of us. For when the 7th becomes perfectly clear that the 8th will open, as it were, released from the tomb, and then you see as God. Jesus is the eye of God that sacrifices himself for every being in the world, being for them their ideal, their perfect state. So I know that's a lot, but it's really, to sum it up really, really quickly, we really don't start to expand our consciousness, truly expand our consciousness, until we recognize and remember who we are, our identity, the I am presence, which is what he's talking about as Jehovah. But it's seeing through the eyes of the Christ, the eyes of love. That's what he's talking about as the clarity of the 7th eye. So as we view the world, the crumbling of the world, and we're witnessing people that have chosen, got seduced by the darkness to do things that the lower ego would judge, but the higher mind, the higher self, the true self, the Christ itself, knows as part of that individual soul and physical avatar, if you will, is in experience. It's in its own experience and its own evolution, its own journey. And that will be taken care of and handled perfectly by Creator and that soul. So as long as we keep our eyes on our own paper, use our imagination, this wonderful organ that has been veiled, we know it now, to create the reality that we want, to desire things to benefit other people, to desire solutions that benefit the planet and the people. That is how quickly we can create this new earth, because as we all resonate and see that in our imagination, it must be reflected in the external reality. So I would encourage you again to visit the Samson and Delilah video that I did. And on that video, I'll put some more links under this one too. You can revisit that. You can revisit the teaching, the question and answer period I had with Sophia and the one, because that'll give you a bit more context. But I mean, this is it. This is I think this is the most fundamentally important teaching of the moment, is the power of the imagination. And I mean, basically, it's like everything you witness, gosh, how could we make that better? How could we make that better to benefit other people? And then we're going to see this come into play really, really quickly, because it's been a bit of a journey. It's been a challenge. But as long as we stay in our hearts and in our love and in our desire to create a world that is more beautiful than we could ever imagine, that's how we're going to create this new earth of ours, very fast, using the imagination. And the seventh, the 7 eyes of God, so that that 8th one will open, and then God only sees God, and we are the vehicle that allows that to happen. We become the lens for God and for the Christ to witness this world, and it's through our witness that it's lifted. So we have a happy new moon in Virgo that just happened, and I'm going to sign off now. I'll be back with another video, a fun video on just yoga. And when you practice every day, you can get better. It becomes part of your natural range of motion. So I'm going to come back and do that a little bit. But I hope that you enjoyed this talk. I want to give a shout out to my friend Lindy, who is the one that sent me this teaching on the eyes of God. And I also want to give a shout out to, excuse me for not looking at your at the camera for a second, but I want to find the name. Here it is. The name of the person that did a video on Neville Goddard. It was actually an original recording of this teaching that Neville Goddard did in 1959. So I want to say thank you to Shinjitsu, as well as Shayna, who introduced me to Neville Goddard and the whole idea that the imagination is the Christ. And this is our most creative, powerful tool. If you can see it in your mind, if you can imagine it, it can be real. It can be made manifest. So God bless you. Thank you for listening. I do hope that this supports you in some way. I'm going to put the whole link to the transcript there if you want to read it in full. And I hope you have a great day, a great weekend. And boy, oh boy, got lots coming up, eh? September, the equinox season, the eclipses. Oh my goodness, lots coming up, lots happening. Stay in your heart, stay in love. Take time to listen to the stillness, because that's where the messages come, through your heart and through the stillness. So God bless you. We'll talk to you soon. Take care. Bye, guys and gals. Cheers.